All right, you freedom-loving boys and girls, here we are, Mission Critical Podcast, episode 17. Yeah, still maybe not doing the Morse code SOS thing. It's just kind of a little bit complicated. So this is the intro. If you are watching or listening to this video, you are part of the resistance. This is part two to our previous one, and begging the question of what's going on here? Is this coincidence? All these events that are taking place, not just domestically, but on an international scale as well. But is it coincidence? All of these negative events, all of these accidents and derailments, or is this actually something more? And it just so happens that I think Paul will be able to help us on this one. It was yesterday or the day before, there was another cyber attack on some USG stuff, and that's going to come into play. So that's what we've been talking about before. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to give everybody a different view so you can see. This is where we were. We were talking about C.A.R.V.E.R when we last spoke last week. We didn't have a chance to finish it. We were over here on the recoverability, recuperable, how easy it is for somebody to either recuperate or recover the effects of that thing being damaged. That's where we had left off. And Patrick was running the show, kind of bringing us down. So Patrick, without further ado, we're going to go back over to you. And I think we were ready to just move over to the V in C.A.R.V.E.R.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right, bringing it back over.
Yep. So the next part of the C.A.R.V.E.R matrix, again, this is something that's scored as a quick recap. Something that they're critical, or they're pieces of a targeting matrix, right? So we are now at the vulnerability piece, and again, these are all scored generally 1 through 5 as to how vulnerable they are. So from a protective standpoint, we're trying to lower that number. From an offensive standpoint, if you're somebody trying to access or destroy these targets, you're trying to up that number up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to throw in there because look, it can be done a couple different ways. And to your point, and we hadn't talked about that, but you could score it, a low number or a high number. Again, you could use this C.A.R.V.E.R matrix to decide if you should have this Stanley Cup or if this should be a titanium cup. And you can score this in a bunch of different ways, as long as you, the end user, know that you're weighing this for a low score outcome or a high score outcome. All right, sorry about that, Patrick. Back.
No, you're good. No, and it's true. You can use it and use whatever scoring chart that you want to, but just keep it uniform across the board so that when you apply it to different areas or items or whatever you're going to use it for, that it's uniform. Anyway, going into the V, the vulnerability piece. So working for Homeland Security, we take a look at, hey, what are some of the critical infrastructure, key critical infrastructure pieces that we need to protect inside the United States, and without being too secretive about it, a lot of the stuff you can kind of figure out, right? So power plants, nuclear plants, anything that's going to generate energy for an area, that's usually protected. Our transportation hubs, obviously airports, train stations, train lines, and things like that. Now, I know Redbeard brought up something last time as far as it goes with train lines. Because of the nature of train lines and where they go, especially through a lot of rural areas, the vulnerability score, depending on how you're doing it, but would be pretty high. That's something you need to shore up if you were on the protective front. If you were attacking it, it's pretty easy. Going back to the historical perspective that Mark brought up last time, the SOE, the OSS back in World War II, when we were trying to stem the flow of the Nazis inside of occupied France and Europe, they were hitting those things pretty easily, and that would slow down that supply chain and the delivery of troops and equipment to where the Germans wanted it. So vulnerability is a key piece. So if you're, I'll turn it over to the group, but if you're looking at doing this for your home or something like that, you want to start looking at ways for the vulnerability that you can harden your defenses, whether it's through physical, things like fences, cameras, dogs, that type of stuff. Anything that's going to give you advance warning or drive away a potential, unwelcome guest, we'll call it. So And I'll turn it over to you guys for thoughts on vulnerability.
Well, that's a great point. And, kind of getting back, into the rhythm of last week's podcast on this nature, just trying to point out there's two sides to this coin, right? You could be looking at it for the vulnerability, the enemy's vulnerability. How vulnerable is that target? How easy is it for me to get there and go ahead and start breaking shit? And then to Patrick's point, just turning it around on yourself. How vulnerable is my house? And what are ways that I can shore up or harden my house, my defenses, to make it less vulnerable, less likely to be a target by just some criminal element that's driving around looking for easy places to break into. And also that includes yourself. And I'll just kind of throw it out that way. How vulnerable are you? What is the outside world's perception of you? How vulnerable are you? That's something else that you can do that either, helps you become more strengthening your game in that area, makes you less likely to be a victim, right? And that's how not to be a victim. And that's kind of part of it right there. Hey, Chip, as the only, law enforcement type guy here, what do you think about that vulnerabilities from like the civilian perspective?
Are you talking about, as Patrick had pointed out, the basic infrastructure that we're looking at, or more to a personal level?
Both, because in law enforcement, you're concerned about both those areas. I mean, let's be honest, most civilians aren't really thinking about how vulnerable the chicken plant is down the road, right? But you might be thinking about like, hey, there's a port of entry here. It's vulnerable to these type of events, these type of crimes. And then as people, we're all vulnerable to crime.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So obviously, I think I mentioned InfraGard last time, and Paul, I think I pushed you a link to that, or pushed Mark to throw to you to a link. But obviously, that's something we're looking at hand in hand with Patrick's colleagues, because as you saw with Colonial Pipeline, it was a year or two ago, and more recently with the cyber attacks, we're really lucky. I like to even when you had was it the DC sniper a couple of years ago, how much of an impact. Now your likelihood of being physically affected, being one of those victims, was minuscule, but that in and of itself, brought to or had significant effect on maneuverability or just mobility around the greater DC area. And so that's how little an incident can be, but have such a great effect. Anything else you wanted me to touch on there, Mark, or any other?
No, I mean, that's a great example. I think a lot of people forgot about that whole DC sniper event, and that actually did. It's a good point. That had a very large impact on the psyche of people. I mean, didn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that's why, you can have nation states like the Chinese going after our cyber systems. But you can also have, if you want to call them lone wolves or maybe a less sophisticated or moderately sophisticated terrorist group doing something like that will have a significant, at least a short-term effect on a particular area.
Well, and then also, what about the long-term effects? Because I guess what I'm saying, if we as a nation, if we as a people have become so vulnerable, because think, hey, we're all so dependent on our cell phones. Well, to me, that means we're pretty vulnerable. So what happens then if somebody just even on a more random basis, people from this part of the country or people from this city start experiencing outages on the cell phone? How does that make the civilian population feel vulnerable?
Absolutely. And it doesn't take much to start getting into the psyche of the populace, whether it's, to a specific geographic location or to us as Americans as a whole. And so that's where, when I know we're on vulnerability now, but we there are a number of areas where we as a nation are extremely vulnerable, and the attacks that are happening now, specifically the Chinese one from earlier this week. That's just the beginning of the probe, or a continuation of a probe that could lead to a much worse outcome down the road if things really got heated.
Hey, Paul, I saw Jeremy. Sorry, and thanks, Jeremy. You guys because I'm not always seeing the same views here. So as I'm jumping around, Jeremy, did you want to chime in there?
Yeah, and I actually have something for Chip too, and maybe Paul can speak to this. But when we look at just slightly going back, the recoverability phase, how to both Paul and Chip and Patrick might be able to speak on this too, but would it be too far of a stretch to consider the fact that our vulnerability is also very much affected by the fact that some of our infrastructure is so old that it may be beyond like recoverability? That's something that I was thinking about, and it's like, okay, well, we have infrastructure since like the 50s and 60s, and it's like all it takes is even in storms, all it takes is something to wipe it out. So like, do you guys think that factors into that vulnerability? Like, we just don't even have good infrastructure.
Yeah, I'll take a little bit of it if you just start with, and then Paul and Patrick, please jump in. But you're absolutely right. There are a number of areas where I think that we would need to shore up. And it was funny, like I said, when NYPD does this, has a pretty good handle, as much as we may not always get along up in the New York area, but you're talking now just drinking water. Okay, how are there things that are being done to make sure that drinking water remains potable? And so obviously you're protecting reservoirs and those kind of things, down to streetlights. So let's say if downtown Manhattan, somebody's able to get into the grid that controls streetlights. I mean, it will make New York traffic, which is normally a challenge, that much more of a challenge. It might not be catastrophic unless you're in an ambulance or a fire truck trying to get to a scene or to a hospital. But just the nuisance of it can have a demoralizing effect on the populace also.
Patrick or Paul? Paul, looks like you want to chime in on that.
Yeah, I Redbeard, I agree with you that having something along the lines of something that is not recoverable, it is a vulnerability, and we still need to do the risk assessments on it. And most people think, because I'm in technology, so we're thinking more of technology-based vulnerabilities. It's primarily internal, right? And honestly, it's just like this mountain that you keep climbing, and you can never get to the summit, and you're never done. It's every day. I mean, how many days go by that you don't read about a vulnerability in a technology platform? It's almost every day. I mean, they're releasing patches all the time, and then patches after patches after patches, and you have to wonder, what is that vulnerability there? I mean, it's just constant. It's just a constant battle, and if you approach it that way, you'll be more successful than if you go into, you're trying to do some consulting for a company maybe, and say, well, you have this many vulnerabilities. We did a scan for you, and you need to remediate these all at once. Well, you don't know if that's going to, damage some legacy software that you have running there that's been there for years that nobody can maintain anymore. It's just barely running and limping along. You have to be really careful with what you can. And the other thing, you can take into consideration the risk. The criticality may be high, but the likelihood may be low. For example, if it's inside your network and it's behind firewalls or anything like that, those type of devices, the overall risk is lower. But if you have even, a low criticality risk at the perimeter, where the Chinese, just based on the last example, can get into that and exploit that vulnerability, then that's more of a higher risk to me than having a high criticality internally. again, so most of the stuff that I view is typically in the area of, technology vulnerabilities, but I also, technology includes the infrastructure, which includes power. So if the power grid goes down, I'm absolutely interested in making sure that we're protected in those areas.
Patrick? Well, here, before we go over to you, Redbeard, did that kind of answer your question from Chip and Paul?
Yeah, I think they actually did a really good job, because it's, just to kind of go over one thing here, it's, it's interesting how, kind of like Paul was saying, like if you have something that's legacy, that's been around forever, it's considered almost like a dinosaur, if you will. That has inherent issues in and of itself, but at the same time, like you have to kind of have this sense of progression. And I feel like, like one of the, like a physical idea of perhaps like that legacy software, as Paul put it, is, like our transformers, for instance, in the physical realm, the physical world. Like everybody for so many years, I would say probably the last 5 to 10 years, have been saying like, dude, our transformer networks are kind of hot trash. Like we keep complaining about it, we keep saying we got to fix it, but then it never gets fixed. And so it's like, by that realm, like it presents its own vulnerability in the fact that it's, at that point, it would be kind of defunct and non-recoverable or whatever. So I like what Paul said, and Chip made a lot of really good points there too. So I appreciate that, guys.
And I just want to emphasize one more time, what was great about that little sidebar, going down that rabbit hole, because it just shows, how so much of this is interrelated. Like there's two sides to that coin. The criticality, how critical is it for you? That goes into vulnerability, how you're shoring it up, as Chip was talking about. As Paul just said, well, that could mean some different things for different, again, individuals, organizations, different nation states. And then, Redbeard, you just, wound it up perfectly. It's like, well, if we know that it's critical, like, our electric grid, again, hopefully there's somebody smarter than us in government who's looking at this from the whole big picture of the nation. And I'm going to come over to Patrick, because I fear that the answer to this is going to be no, but who's looking at this and saying, here's how I'm applying C.A.R.V.E.R to my infrastructure. I'm breaking this down, and then we're coming up with what we're going to do, because, if it's something that I need, and see, that's the other part about this. Mm-hmm. It's the things that I need. Again, you might be looking at it from what you think the enemy needs, or you could be looking at it from your selfish perspective of what I need and what's important to me. Patrick, does that kind of bring it back over to you?
Yeah, it sure does. And, whether we're talking about, railways, we're talking about computer systems, your own personal safety, what have you, the number one thing that's always going to help mitigate any type of threat is awareness to it, right? So whether it's like Paul was talking about computer networks, you've got to be on top of that. We get these constant emails and DHS, hey, push, like here's these patch updates that are going to happen. You have to constantly restart your computer every now and then, that type of stuff, right? We're talking about, pieces of critical infrastructure. A lot of those are the actual security for that is in the responsibility of the state and local law enforcement agencies. So you'll have your DHS representatives. Sometimes folks from the Bureau will come by, depending on what level of facility it is. They'll take a look at it and assess it, and they'll make recommendations, but it's actually up to the state and locals to execute those recommendations and put those practices into place. So awareness is always going to be your number one, ally to mitigate any of that stuff. So are we moving on next to effects? Mute.
You're muted. Yep.
Yeah, no, I'm good now. Yeah. Hey, I just wanted to throw in one last little human aspect of this, besides me leaving my microphone on mute. But I thought Chip was bringing this up again as well. Patrick, to your point, how we're going to mitigate this, and because even within that aspect of thinking about C.A.R.V.E.R, threats, vulnerabilities, there's still going to be a human dimension. And there unfortunately are still going to be people who are too political or too head in the sand, or again, everybody wants to think it's fight or flight, but it's actually fight, flight, posture, submit. I mean, so there's all kinds of things that people could do, even in the face of what you were just saying, Patrick, that could still result in a not as optimal outcome for the decision-making process.
Yep, absolutely. All right, sorry about that. We'll move on to the next element of C.A.R.V.E.R, and that's the effect on the target, or the effect on the population that the target is in. If that's a computer system or something like that, and everybody's shut down, you can't run your business, or people aren't getting paid, or that type of stuff, that's definitely gonna have an impact, right? So that's a big piece. If it's a more personal type thing, like if there's an attack on a railway or something like that, the psychology of most of the population, and this is my opinion from observing this stuff for years, is if it's kind of like a not in my backyard type mentality. Well, that happened over there, that can't happen here, until it does, right? So, and sometimes those things are natural disasters. Not everything's man-made. In my opinion, everything comes down to people. No matter whether you're talking about cyber stuff, you're talking about natural disasters, that type of anything. It doesn't matter what it is. People are going to be the ones responding to it, trying to mitigate it and help recover from it. So that's something we definitely need to take a look at, is the effect on the target. That's why when you start putting all these things together, it kind of lends itself to, from the protective standpoint, if we're looking at like the DHS model, okay, here's the criticality, here's how accessible that is. So these computer networks that Paul was just mentioning, that's great. If the security is really tight, well, they can't really get in there. They're always looking for ways, though. That's why these updates and patches are always being pushed out there. The recuperability on that thing. How long is it going to take to get it back online? That's another factor. But the effect on the target overall, what is that going to cause? So when we look at the effects on the population, we also look at the effect on whatever the target is, and say, okay, can we, if we're on the aggressive side, we're attacking another country, we're looking for cascading effects. So I know that if I take out a power station that's near hospitals and transportation hubs, I can have a serious impact, not only on just people losing power, just the general citizenry, but I can, I've also impacted hospitals. They now have to, rely on generators. Law enforcement is going to have to adjust for that type of stuff. That's what they look at from, we would look at from an attacking standpoint. So from a protective standpoint, we're just doing the same thing in reverse. And awareness, again, is key. Awareness and communication and coordination between agencies and people. And that's why when it comes down to the general citizen to see something, say something, well, I think we probably need to do a better job of educating what we're talking about with that, because it's just kind of too broad. But I'll turn it over to the group.
I kind of want to bring it over to Chip and Paul real quickly, but to your point, something that you said, and I hope everybody's picking this up. This might seem like it's a really kind of deep concept, but it's really not, because everything is cascading. So when you use that term cascading, previously in your comments, Patrick, you talked about recuperability. So again, however you're going to score this, like if it scores really low, in other words, whatever this thing is, it's going to be hard to fix and hard to replace. Then that means the effects portion we're talking about here is going to be potentially exponentially, greater, or have an even greater effect. So it might score that I'm going to do this one event. I'm going to target this one node, because it is very hard for this to be recovered. And everybody has become so dependent upon it. If they don't have it, that's why I did a class called The First 72 Hours. 72 hours later might be enough to push people over the edge. And I kind of want to bring this over to Chip, because, again, Chip, from your background in the East Coast and that, you see people, you've been in those environments way more than I have. I'm not going to lie. So I can only assume what those effects are going to be, to Patrick's point, on an attack on something that might take a long time to get back up. People already freak out half the time if the Twitter had a glitch today and it was down for 4 hours, and people lose their freaking shit over that. So Chip, you kind of already hit on this with just something as simple as yeah, the lights, it's an inconvenience when you really think about it. But if I've done enough damage where you don't have lights for the next week, what are the long-term effects of that on the populace? There you go.
Good point. So I was in downtown Manhattan on 9/11. I was downtown Manhattan during Superstorm Sandy. Now, both of those events, like none of them shut down our ability to get food or water. So, as catastrophic, especially how 9/11 was, and even to a slightly lesser extent, but a larger impact wise with Superstorm Sandy, you'd be surprised. At least New Yorkers were very good. They rolled with it. There was, obviously there were, I remember they only opened up gas stations for law enforcement for a period of time. So you'd get a message that said, okay, a gas station up on, I don't know, 50th and 9th Avenue or something like that had gas, and they were just giving it out to law enforcement. So you'd get up there to gas up your car to make sure that you could still respond to other instances related to work. So until something happens that really is, okay, I got to go to my emergency food storage and this is all I've got. Or emergency, something happens to the water supply, and you really are in a hurt locker. I think we'll be all right. There'll be inconvenience, but it won't. But there'll be resilience. Again, from those two catastrophes that I've been a part of, people are resilient and they get through it. But again, it's not coming down to, okay, where am I going to get my next meal? That's when things start going off the rails, in my opinion.
Well, and that's why I was coming to you with, having lived in such, such densely populated, civilian areas. And you just said it. Yeah. Those were catastrophic events, but no one's next meal was being threatened or their water. Yeah. So Paul, let's bring it over to you. So if we're looking at effects, right, and we're talking about vulnerabilities in the C.A.R.V.E.R, how does that factor in from your perspective? And what do you think about the effects portion?
Well, every minute that a business is down, right, they're not making any money. They're losing a tremendous amount of money. So the disaster recovery and business continuity programs are crucial to have in place. They need to be reviewed at least annually, if not more frequently, especially the business continuity, right? In that situation, you're going to have each individual lines of business within, whether it's HR, accounting, IT, all those, to go over the prioritization of their assets and of their infrastructure that they have, so that we can use that business continuity program to then have a good, robust disaster recovery. So if a disaster does occur, we know, okay, well, this, server needs to come up first, or this network infrastructure absolutely has to come up before that, because otherwise it can't communicate. And it goes down the line there. And it's one of those things, though, to be careful. And one thing I would encourage everyone to know, yes, during a business continuity exercise or the program, you're going to prioritize some machines over others, or some departments over others. It doesn't mean that all aren't critical. It's just that you need to have your infrastructure up first. Then you need to have your business and payroll up, because you have to pay your people, right? So there may be some things down the road that may take a couple days to recover, but don't take it personally. Just participate, and just because you're not, you don't have a priority one doesn't mean you're not a high priority. The whole company is a priority. They can't go without a day without business without losing money. But that's the way I kind of see that recoverability.
All right. I think in all fairness, we got to roll it over to Redbeard. Peaceful, not harmless, because we're sitting here talking about the effects. And we haven't been specific about a specific event, but as Chip was talking about, we do have in our recent history as Americans, some And look, and I'll be the first one to argue this. More often than not, it's going to be a natural disaster, and we'll save that for another time. But that doesn't mean you don't get prepared and you don't consider these other more catastrophic events, right? And Paul was just talking about, like, okay, how are you going to do that from the IT, the tech side of it? But I kind of want you to then say, well, what do you think? What are the effects? How do the effects of this, whatever the event is, how does that work on our populace? I guess I'm also asking you for a little bit of your opinion on what our populace is our populace today as resilient as in Chip's example of the New Yorkers were. And Chip, not arguing with you, I was out there at that same time too. I mean, that little stupid thing behind me, some places, for being down there from day one for I think it was there 5 days, and I think we got pulled out on the 5th or the 6th day once the main National Guard units rolled in. But I'm here to tell you, then a week after that, Chip, and I'd love to sit and have a beer with you and talk about this. A week after that, there was people talking during the national anthem. You remember that time? It didn't take long for people to go from being, they went from hero to zero pretty freaking quickly. And so, Redbeard, I want your thoughts on that, the effects.
Yeah. So
we haven't specified an event, but but look at what's going on around us.
Well, and so there's actually and Chip made a comment too, because we're kind of talking in the in the hidden chat there, and so there's two immediate events that come to mind for me that we can see as having not only immediate but continuing and lasting consequences as it pertains to the populace, right? The first one is Flint, and then the second one is the Ohio train derailment. Look, these are two things that we've never really seen a full resolution to this. And so when we look at the effects, and granted, they're not like a direct attack or anything like that, but they're relevant because when you look at, and this is something that you all might be able to shine some light on too, but look at and Mark, you kind of brought it up too, but look at the behavior patterns of people, look at the responses, look at how things are being dealt with. And I think that, as it pertains to the overall effect, I mean, my God, when you look at, take the train derailment, for instance, when that first happened, people were like, oh yeah, like this is really bad. And then you had some individuals from, the Ohio government, they're like, oh, it's not that bad. And then they're like, I would totally bring my family here, but yet they didn't bring their family here. Instead, they had people in hazmat suits, and then you had people getting violently ill from this, all while being like, oh, it's not that bad. It's like, honesty is a big thing here too, right? So when we assess the effects on a population, we have to be honest about what's actually going on. And Mark, you might have brought this up, and perhaps Patrick did as well, but when it comes down to politics, unfortunately, politics does interfere how we address the effect on population. And it's unfortunate. And we can also see that very much in the Flint water crisis as well, to where where's the resolution? That's been going on for how many years now? And they're still drinking, for the most part, water out of bottles, for God's sakes. The effect on populations, depending on what the incident or what it is, or whatever it is that occurs, is going to vary both in time span, accumulated effect, or immediate effect as it relates to what the situation is. So I don't know if Patrick, if you want to elaborate on that further or expound on that, but yeah.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, and you're right. A lot of times these things are not fully, they don't meet like a clear endpoint where everybody's happy and we can move on with life. There's a saying with DHS, and I think on the law enforcement side, I think the Bureau, Chip can correct me if I'm wrong on this. There's a saying that everything starts local and ends local. So when some event occurs, they'll usually ask for FEMA assistance or DHS or somebody that's going to come in there and bring resources and some type of expertise to that affected area. Once they're there, they'll kind of, guide and assist, because what the federal government doesn't want to do, or at least where I've worked, is walk in and start calling the shots. It's not like Hollywood, like, okay, guys, everything's good here. I'm in charge, that type of stuff. It's a you're doing this with and through the local government. So once you reached a certain point where you think that, hey, guess what? These resources are no longer needed. We're going to let this community reach a point where it's going to recover on its own. You're still left with the same people that are in charge of that area. A lot of times in these events, especially Mark hit the nail on the head, there's more, natural disaster type events than there are man-made. Well, hopefully it kind of stays that way. So
don't jinx us, buddy.
You're dealing with like local elected officials, and those are usually they're not attuned to being like hammered by the press and asked questions and that type of stuff. So if they don't have a good person that's like their public spokesperson, their PR department that can actually reach out to or the public affairs officer that can reach out to the local or on part of that local leader and give good talking points. That's where things start to unravel pretty quick, because no matter what the disaster is, whether it's like Paul talking about like a cyber attack on a system, or it's somebody whose backyard or basement's flooded, the number one question is, okay, I can get through this. I just need to know how long it's going to take for this to end so that we can get back on track. Like continuity of operations, continuity of government type things. And that's, and I've seen like really, really bad examples of this stuff, and the population's ready to start rioting. It gets ugly, or people that kind of deny things, or they're just not available. And hey, I'm the police chief, but I'm on leave. I'm going to let my deputy handle this. And the deputy's like, wait, what? I don't want to, I didn't sign on for this, and it just gets bad. So that's always something that's it. Everything comes down to people, and usually falls down to the local government. So anyway, hopefully that answered your question.
So yeah, no, you did a really good job. And one thing, and I don't know if everybody can speak to this if they'd like to, but one thing I want to shoot back to you right away real quick is I don't think a lot of people really understand like the real difference between like an overtime accumulated effect versus an immediate effect. And I'm sure all of us have an idea of like how that plays and as it pertains to different situations. So like, for instance, like an example of this would be like a hurricane, right? So you have all your wind and your rain, and you have the driving force of the waves that come from the hurricane that batter the shoreline. That's an immediately felt effect. It's very destructive. But as most people realize, that's not the thing that kills most people during a hurricane. It's the flooding, which is the long-term effects, right? The accumulated effects that end up killing more people in a hurricane. So I don't know if there's a way that you guys can tie that in or expound upon that. And I kind of like to hear it from each person briefly, but I think that's an important thing that our viewers should kind of have a handle on too, as it pertains to different situations. Go ahead.
And I'm just going to chime in here before anyone else does, because you guys both just did two different things, and something that Patrick had mentioned, would it all boil down to communications and humans. And so, now Redbeard, you just took us into the natural disaster side, and under those type of conditions, there can still be high consequences, but that's mitigated over time usually, right? We are able to get these because it's limited failures of systems. I mean, this is where Paul can talk in there more, like certain key parts of infrastructure, whether that's, cell towers and
it can be applied to many things, not just.
But I think to Patrick's point, it's the key thing there is at least we're able to talk to each other, because, again, if I was a bad guy, one of the first things I would do is make sure I would destroy your ability to have good communications. And I mean, cell phones, internet, all that stuff that we've become so just, completely addicted to, right? We're users. That's what we're users, right? We're addicted to this shit. Once that goes, though, I think what Patrick was saying, what you just said, you were talking about natural disasters. I think it becomes completely different once that is taken away, and that's again 72 hours. So I don't know if we want to go to Patrick. I just had to chime in.
Yep.
Chip, Paul, well, Redbeard, you got a rebuttal or anything? Or I mean, see where I'm kind of going with that a little bit?
And just to kind of bring it just for a second here outside of even natural disasters, look at warfare in like how it pertains to like mines that are left over. War is an immediate effect, but long term, you have mines that are laying all over, and that's something that's brought up actually in recent days about cluster munitions. Like how many people 30 years later get their freaking arm blown off because they thought, oh, this is a freaking baseball, right? Like that's a long-term effect that will that is something the populace has to deal with. So it's a very all-encompassing scenario there.
That's a great point though on the cluster munitions. Yeah. Chip, Paul, yeah, you're back up. Paul, you want to take it?
Yeah, I have something outside of my area of expertise, just something that I've been through. And, if you've been through a flood, it has a direct impact on you, right? You have to make sure that you're either out of the area. God forbid you're up high enough to keep out of the flood from your house, because you might end up on your roof if you do that method. But sometimes it happens so fast, you can't help it. The long-term effects are when you have a lot of people experiencing these floods, you don't have the construction crews and the cleanup crews to fix it. So what I ended up doing is I had 4 feet of drywall cut out for a floor that was flooded, and it was in the middle of winter. And I ended up using my buddy heaters and stuff just to keep things going because it damaged everything. I mean, everything was damaged. It was kind of just trying to get through things. But the mold, long term, a lot of people will wait for the construction crew to get there, and they'll deal with that mold there. And if it's wet and it's getting through, and you cut some of it open, so there's a lot of things there that the long-term effect can have a huge impact on you. And fortunately, I was aware that we needed to do that, but long term, I needed help because I didn't know how to do it, but to make sure that we had all that remediated prior to it.
That's a great point on that long-term effect. I think, again, whether it's a natural disaster, 100%. the mold, or the cluster bomb munitions. Patrick, I see you nodding your head up there as well. Anything to add in that? Or because if not, and unless somebody has something to add, let's let you have the final comments and then move us into the final part of C.A.R.V.E.R.
Okay, yeah. Last bit on the effects piece. I mean, as far as what Paul said, floods. I've worked floods before. I've done the whole response to the recovery. The one thing that's you see the best and worst in people, and the best you see in folks is people that show up afterwards to help. For no money, they just want some resources to help clean up these communities. Right. A lot of the parks and rec people come clean up if the people that do streets and sanitation. But then there's groups, and I'll throw them out there because they're fantastic, is Team Rubicon. They exist to respond to help people recover for stuff like this. So the effect on that, you always want to mitigate it, and that's part of the mitigation process. So I'll end at that, and then we'll move into the last piece, which also kind of circles us back to the very beginning of C.A.R.V.E.R. Is the recognizability. And it also kind of ties into what Redbeard said too. Initially, hey, if a hurricane's coming in, this is the hard rain and stuff like that. You might not recognize what that's going to do, a day, 2 days later, when now all of a sudden those floodwaters have bogged the streets down, or they're starting to shift and shut down key pieces of infrastructure that would help you recover or move somewhere else to a point of safety. So the recognizability point is big. Going on the attack side, and this is Mark, this kind of like is right at you with the old OSS days, like kind of how we started. We want the piece of whatever it is we're trying to attack to be impacted for sure. How recognizable do we want it to be? That can be by design. Is everybody going to know it immediately? Think of 9/11. You guys were talking about that. That was an instant recognizability. When we're talking about like attacking, other key infrastructure like railways or bridges and stuff like that, that can be done slowly to the point where nobody might not be able to figure out, hey, who did this or how was it done? It's just now all of a sudden it's failing. So I'll leave it at that. But the recognizability piece is big because that kind of goes into the cumulative effect and everything else that goes along with that.
Yeah.
Well, and
that
I'm
was
just
good.
going to throw in, and for the group, just one last little thing for everybody to mull over before you guys start commenting is, the recognizability also goes from the attacker's perspective. I could have this thing that for all the other aspects of C.A.R.V.E.R, and I'm looking at it from an attacker's perspective, and it's saying, this is what I need to do for all these reasons. It's going to take forever for them to recover. It's going to have incredible, it's super vulnerable. There's no security. It's going to have huge effects on the populace. But me and my guys, we don't know what the hell it is. We know it exists, but we don't know what it is. So that goes into the use of symbolism in terrorism, right? The two towers, the twin, everybody knew, the World Trade Center, right? People recognize these things. People recognize, oh, there's an airplane that's just been hijacked. Oh, I fly in airplanes all the time. It's that kind of stuff. So as Patrick just pointed out, there could be this thing, and I'm attacking it, but no one even knows it's taking place. So I'm just leaving that as a thought for everybody, because that doesn't mean you still don't do it. As long as you, the attacker, you know what it is and you can recognize it, it might work in your benefit if the adversary, your opponent, doesn't recognize it, even though you've been just like, again, death of 1,000 paper cuts. Use that as a good analogy. You didn't even recognize that I was cutting you until it was too late. So just wanted to throw that out there on the final aspect of C.A.R.V.E.R. Patrick, you got a rebuttal or anything to me before we turn around to Chip and Paul and Redbeard?
No, I think that's great. And it just goes to, like, if you were thinking about, from like an aviator standpoint, okay, hey, I'm going to be dropping some munitions in an area. Well, I need to be pretty damn sure what my target is and that I'm going to recognize it from whatever my altitude is. So this type of thing also lends itself, C.A.R.V.E.R Matrix lends itself to helping you have the ability to put yourself in other people's shoes and look at things from different perspectives. So it adds to that creativity. And if you can be a very creative attacker, it makes you a better protector. So that's kind of where I picked up the ideology and why I picked it up. And it's just a great thing. Like, if you're not asking, hey, how would I attack me, whether that's you personally or you in your workplace or in an environment, then, maybe you should. And be as detailed and as thorough as you can. The more creative you can be, the better you're going to be able to protect yourself.
Well, and also to your point, and I loved how you used the aviator. So, like, whenever I was dropping, there's usually somebody on the ground who's communicating and, doing a CAS, right? A close air support. You're talking to each other and you're doing things. You got to mitigate and you've got to deconflict. Maybe somebody else is flying a drone. So what, Patrick, what you just said, what made me really smile, is because it also implies that if I go through C.A.R.V.E.R and all of this is worth doing, but it's going to be kind of difficult for my guy in the sky to drop that, then it means I'm going to need some ground support units, with, who are glidden, laser designators, or they're down there marking the target somehow. And we're doing this deconfliction. So I love that part right there, because that's the other truth. And for this whole argument, I'm basically trying to say that, in my opinion, for what it's worth, I think there's guys on the ground right now. All right. Patrick took me down that rabbit hole. Let's kind of go around. Paul, you laughed, so maybe you get to go first, sir. And then we'll go to Chip. Chip looks like he needs another beer, or he's still lamenting how the Minnesota Twins beat the Yankees like a month ago, and I'm not letting it go.
He's never going to let you hold that down on the Yankees.
Well, it doesn't happen where we sweep the Yankees. So, Chip's like, dude, seriously? That was like the first time in 30 years. Let it go, man. All right, Paul, bringing it over to you, sir.
Yeah, so even on the IT side, we do red team exercises. And I think as far as recognizability goes, and maybe this doesn't fall in there, but to me it does, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the biggest attack vectors in the past was a USB drive in the parking lot, a USB drive in the lobby. People pick it up, stick it in their computer, and get infected. So as part of our red team exercises, we would leave a random USB drive sitting around to see if anybody picked it up. Initially, they did. Over time, they stopped. And I don't think there's a single person in any company that I have worked for in the last 10 years that would pick up a USB drive and put it in their computer. So I think that that's working. And again, that goes back to awareness and so on. So that's kind of what I see there. But a lot of the red team exercises, they're doing a lot more things, penetration tests, to ensure, I mentioned it before about firewalls, and I don't want to get too technical, but we're doing those type of things. We'll also utilize during penetration tests, assuming a breach of some kind, and allowing someone to test without actually doing something internally. They'll get access to an internal device, and then they can start banging away on internal resources as well. Because guess what? What if somebody does breach that firewall? And they're already inside. You want to make sure that you're testing everything internal as well. The key thing is, if you do pay somebody to do a red team exercise for you or a penetration test independently, just ensure that you make sure that they're not going to act on something if they do find the vulnerability.
You made me think of another thing too. You talked about people wouldn't pick up the USB drives. It's the same with phishing scams. Most people are aware of and they know what the phishing scam looks like. Generally speaking, they're like, okay, this looks, circumspect. This looks suspicious. But, from an enemy's perspective, going back to Patrick's thing, and the effects. Well, what were the effects? I mean, how long did it take for our population, or, in this hypothetical conversation, for that population to become aware of this threat from the cyber side? Well, how much damage was done in between? So if you look and put your C.A.R.V.E.R matrix on that, you'll be like, okay, after about 90 days, people will maybe get wise to this. But that was 90 days of damage. Can I do it? Does that give me enough of a window to do the damage and I need to do? And that damage from, and this is, I'm kind of starting to bring us into from nation states and smart actors, that might be more than enough damage. Because maybe I didn't go in there and use that 90-day as you became aware and recognized, these events. And as we were kind of saying in the pregame, but now I've mapped out. It gave me just enough time to figure out and map out every system. And that's all I needed to know, because now I know the points of vulnerability for when I do actually flip the switch and actually do something, catastrophic or, kinetic. And I can, tag team on this from the, ELINT or the electronic side of it as well. But so I really like that. Before I move on, Paul, did I say anything too stupid on the tech side, or did that make sense?
No. One thing I'd like to point out is that most people may say, well, why don't you just block the USB port, right? And we do that. But guess what? There will always be exceptions made. Somebody has a need. They need a presentation. They're traveling, outside the United States. So, yeah, we use a combination of blocking USB ports. There are always exceptions, so you need to make sure that you keep an eye out on those type of things. That's all I'd like to add.
Right on. All right, Chip, Redbeard, who wants to go chime in on that? Again, we're finishing up C.A.R.V.E.R. Well, it's actually technically not finished yet, but Patrick and I kind of talked about that a little bit. We'll do that next. So any options or any additional comments to throw in there, Chip, from your side on that whole recoverability? Again, you live in big urban areas, so can you give us, and also from a law enforcement perspective, what if this takes, 30 days? And there's sporadic power, but what does that look like from a law enforcement perspective?
First, I'm gonna put a double tap what Patrick had said and go with
oh, nice.
Oh boy,
another gray shirt, great organization doing great things around the country and actually around the world. What actually had stuck in my mind is when you had, Mark, you had used the example of, okay, maybe it's only like a 90-day event or something like that. But then that goes along with, as we, Redbeard had brought up earlier, as far as the accumulated effect. Maybe that's all you wanted to do. You just wanted to plant the seed in people's heads, like the general populace's heads, that, hey, this is vulnerable, so that now they start getting, they're always looking over their shoulder or whatever. So that you'll have your immediate effect, and in a situation like that, just like in Flint with the accumulated effect of drinking bad water, the accumulated effect of having an attack, and go back to the DC sniper, that gets into people's heads for a really long time. But you all had covered all the other points so well. That's the extent of what I will say on that.
Hey, thanks for bringing back the DC sniper, though. I mean that seriously, because that, because I was out there during that time, and that really did. I mean, and I bet there's still people to this day who that still has some type of an effect on, because
Yeah.
a lot of people are scared, man. I mean, it was so random. I mean, and that's how I would do shit. But all right, Redbeard.
Yeah. So actually, I'm just gonna say something real brief. I think one of the best ways, and it's a very, very small, isolated way of how Carver kind of plays into it, but we all, I don't know how many of us have brothers, sisters, siblings, whatever. But growing up, we used to play pranks on each other, and so unwittingly, I think as kids, like we kind of used an amalgamation of Carver. Like, okay, like what's the most efficient way I can do this without my sibling realizing that this is me? And the one thing that comes to mind, as stupid as it sounds, is like taking the batteries out of the remote, and your sibling is just going out of their freaking mind. Like, I know for a fact that there was batteries in here. And so, over time they're going crazy because they're like, dude, like there's no way.
That's pretty messed up, dude.
What's up?
That's pretty messed up. That's
Yeah.
some psychological warfare shit right there, dude.
No, and like that's the thing though, right? Like to kind of go to Chip's point, like you look at something in the long term, like you don't even have to do physical damage. You could just do like that psychological, like he brought up. And it's like that sometimes can be way worse than the physical damage that could be done, because as he said, people will carry that for a very long time, almost to a point to where you can get people that are so paranoid to where they will ask for overreaching tyrannical things to be like, hey, like I think my neighbor's doing this. As much as I hate to say it, like think of what happened with the communism in 50s and 60s. Like people were turning each other in, maybe not en masse, but on a high enough thing to where, like you just get Joe Blow who runs a donut shop and he's like, dude, I'm just trying to make donuts and put out coffee, and I'm sitting in front of a court trying to tell people I'm not this. And people legitimately were terrified. So, there's a lot to be said about psychological impacts as it pertains to C.A.R.V.E.R. So that's where I'm going to leave it.
Hey, I'm just going to, because you went down this road before we bring it back over to the group, I'm just going to bring in, the whole Rona and the madness of the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Look at how that effect is still reverberating through our society right now. And
100%.
And hey, Patrick, quick question. I kind of want to just bring up the slide that's got the acronym and give you a chance to just give just run through because now we're concluded with C.A.R.V.E.R. with the exception of, you call it shock, I call it X factor. And, but I just kind of want you to maybe wrap it all up if you don't mind. But we've kind of gone over it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, just to summarize.
Yeah. I thought that was the view. There we go. There we go. Can you summarize? Yeah, there you go, sir.
Yeah. So again, C.A.R.V.E.R. matrix is all in all to assess, or to prioritize targets that the military was going to hit. And in reverse, we look at it from the standpoint in the Department of Homeland Security of how we can protect things, right? So those components are criticality. How critical is the target to, whatever, area it's in? How accessible is it? Can we get to it? And again, we've gone over like a variety of different, fields and areas that this can touch, which kind of like everywhere. Recoverability, recuperability. When something goes down, how long is it going to take it to get back online? Vulnerability, we talked about that. That's kind of self-explanatory, even though we went in depth on all these effects on the populace. I mean, that's really why somebody's doing it, right? They're looking to cause some effects, and then how recognizable is it? The last piece that we'll touch on is what is referred to. Mark's heard it referred to as X factor. And I don't know if that came from military or intel community.
That was just me.
Oh, was it? Okay. But
yeah, it's just an X factor.
Yeah. But what we call it plus shock, right? And that means psychological shock to the affected area, right? So 9/11, obviously, that was done primarily for shock. Yeah, they chose those as symbolic targets, and the shock was enormous, right? It drove us into 2 wars. It changed the world, the way that the United States does a lot of different things. We travel at the airport. Security apparatus has changed. Entire career fields changed because of that.
The Patriot Act, FISA courts.
Yeah. Yep. All that stuff came into play because of one day's events, right? Then you go into whether it's, I mean, we've heard a bunch of things brought up today. So we've talked about the DC sniper, or snipers, even though they weren't snipers, but just the psychological shock that caused. I mean, imagine not only were people petrified, but I'm sure if you're running a business, hey, I'm calling in today because I don't want to get shot. Okay, well, that's going to probably have an impact on your business. Anything is going to have some type of psychological shock, and you have to look at that for the long-term effects. People get post-traumatic stress from a variety of events. It's not just military members on a battlefield. So that's something you definitely have to look out for. One thing that I didn't bring up earlier, but in natural disasters, the psychological shock of losing like family pets, that's, hey, that I'm a single person or an elderly person, and my dog is kind of like, what gets me up in the morning, that dog's gone. That's a problem. So one of the things that's put into place is a recovery plan for, pets and displaced pets to, bring them back to their owners. But I mean, just shock in general is like the psychological impact that these things have on the community. So from an attack standpoint, maybe you want to maximize that depending on what your objectives are. On the protective standpoint, you definitely need to keep this in mind as part of your recovery and mitigation plans. So I'll leave it up to the group for that one.
I just want to add, I mean, it goes into, before everybody chimes in, I mean, at your last point, I mean, there's so much symbolic value to everything that you're going to be looking at. And, I love how you just brought it, because symbolism can also be emotional, right? Hey, my pet is dead, and my pet died during this, whatever it was, man-made, an attack or a natural disaster. But that's a huge point right there, is that psychological impact. Yeah. So for me, the X factor is just like, it's that unknown element. Hey, this shouldn't really bother me, but it does. And now I'm just like, I'm not the person I was anymore. Or, hey, this stupid little thing, I'm just doing it right now. I don't know. I'm just making it as a bad example. But if I could just carry this little comb thing with me, and I always could comb my beard a couple times a day, it has no value. It's not value added to the mission, but it's value added to me. So when you were first talking about it, I'm like, yeah, I just don't have it there because I just call it the X factor, because it can go in both directions, if that makes sense.
Yep.
All right, Chip, how you doing, sir? You still with us there? You got a little bit more time?
You got about five on my end.
Okay, well then why don't you give us some closing thoughts from the man, the myth, the legend? And I'm not even saying that because you like a shitty baseball team. I mean it seriously.
Did we just lose Redbeard?
Yeah, we lost Redbeard for just a second, but he'll be back.
All right, good to go. Again, all good points that you gentlemen, who are a heck of a lot smarter than I am, have brought up. I wasn't sure how this second half of of last week's episode or podcast would go. I learn something every time I watch these or talk to you all. So thank you very much. Greatly appreciated. And thanks for letting me be a part of it.
Well, thanks for taking the time out of your really busy life. And I mean that seriously. And, all the kidding aside, I mean, just thanks. I mean, I for what it's worth, and right now somebody's like, oh, Mark, don't get sappy. But the very first time I met you with what we were doing downrange, I was like, this is a good dude. I just knew. You just know it. So there, back to Patrick's point, the shock or the X factor. Like having Chip in your team, there's going to be a certain X factor there. Just for him being around, it just is. You need to consider that kind of stuff too when you think about C.A.R.V.E.R. So if you got to bounce, you bounce when you need to. But hey, one last quick question for you before you do go. And I'm kind of putting you on the spot. We didn't talk about this in the pregame. What are your just final thoughts? I mean, are we vulnerable? Is something going to happen, or do you think that's just oh, come on, guys, relax? What are your thoughts?
Again, I've been out of the game for a little while, so I would look to probably Patrick. I think you're the one that's most plugged in the group of us to answer that question.
No, it's a personal question. It doesn't have to be based on, yeah.
I mean, are we vulnerable? Yes. Is it vulnerable in a catastrophic way? I don't think so. Are we going to take some punches? We are going to. Yes, we are going to be a punch magnet. But I think at the end of the day, our resilience as a nation is what separates us from everybody else around the world. And I know that a lot of you have seen that, at the pointy end of the spear. So I still have full faith and confidence in the country. I'm not always happy with what leadership does. But I also do think that whatever your next podcast on just your personal preparedness, whether it's that go bag, whether it's the first 72 hours, I think those are phenomenal topics, and things that even just pointing out a couple of, stay in shape, make sure you're on your gun. If you got a gun, you're training with it. And it's not just collecting dust in your safe somewhere. Things like that, know how to fish, know how to hunt, those kind of things that hopefully it never gets to that, but at least you have in the back of your mind some awareness that, hey, I can, if things really should hit the fan, I'll be okay for a little while.
Right on. Anybody, any comments for Chip before he bounces?
I'll stick around. My wife isn't wigwagging to me just yet.
All right. Because Redbeard, I mean, I think what Chip just said, I mean, we're talking about this, and then honestly, matter of fact, because I know Patrick, you got a bounce too. I'll shut up. Chip just made your comments that you were texting to me earlier today about the other things that we need to do, right?
Yeah.
We just kind of covered C.A.R.V.E.R. I just wanted to make sure we take care of this while you and Chip are here. My personal opinion of what I think is going on in the world right now, based on how I look at the world, through my own subjective lens, that's one thing. But Chip just made the same points you were making: stay in shape, physical fitness, learning some skills. And I know that's important too. So why don't we give you a chance to say that? Because I know you have to bounce soon too. It's all you, Patrick.
Okay, thanks. It's kind of a heady thing to end on, but
we're not ending, but I just want to give you a chance because Chip just brought it up. Just respond.
Yeah, I've got to get going, so it'll be almost like my ending. But I think we face a lot of threats today, and I don't know if that's if it's always been that way, or it's because we have this like constant like flow of information that's more than we've ever had in human history, and we're more aware now. I don't know, but nonetheless, I think that everything comes down to, like we talked about, C.A.R.V.E.R matrix. Well, the one thing that's always going to be, what keeps you out of that is your awareness, right? Keeps you from being the soft target that somebody wants to hit, whether that's your cyber network, you personally, critical infrastructure, what have you, your awareness. So you've always got to vote in these things, right? As far as it doesn't matter what the other threats are, your awareness and having a plan and just taking action and communicating with other people and influencing them in a positive way. I honestly think that's probably what makes America and makes us resilient. But we've got to maintain that. We've got to spread that as much as we can. And I think that this, thanks again for having me on the podcast. I think this is really a great venue to do that.
Well, hey, before you go, and again, I know you got a bounce too. So why don't we just call an audible? Chip just made a great statement. You've just made a great statement. Redbeard, with your permission, let's just forget talking about like the specific details and the train derailments. Let's just put that in, because that needs to be another kind of conversation. Let's give Paul his final thoughts, and then maybe we just wrap this one up. And hey, for the first time, it might be actually a podcast under an hour and a half. So,
which is impressive for 5 p.m.
Oh, yeah, right. Paul, you saw what everybody just did. What are your thoughts? Final thoughts there, sir.
Real quick, I can say that I don't know everywhere I've lived, there's railroad tracks everywhere, so they can have a derailment almost anywhere and get to almost any area. But I'll leave it at that. That's just what it's anecdotal, but it's just something that I've noticed. But I will say, because we've mentioned a DC sniper multiple times tonight, the media got it wrong then with the white box truck and set us up to look out for things that were not actually accurate, and law enforcement did as well, because they're the ones that push the white box truck as well. So it's not just the media today. Of course, the media today is 1,000 times worse, but they've had their issues in the past. So just do your own research.
Okay, well, so before we bring it over to Redbeard, because I kind of do want to hear, your thoughts, Patrick, Chip. And kind of as we go to closing and Redbeard takes us on closing, I guess my closing comments were like, first and foremost, again, thanks to everybody who's watching the videos, but again, thanks to you guys for taking the time out of your lives, and
you guys are awesome
and hanging out. But so I think for everyone's knowledge, and then kind of, Paul, your thoughts on this. So I think what we're going to do, and Patrick, I'll share it with you. Chip, I'll share it with you too, if you're interested. I'll send you the slide deck from these classes I taught years ago. I mean, again, this is Patrick. I mean, what is this? 2012? 2013? 10 years ago. But I was looking at them, and it's still pertinent. And it's actually kind of funny to look at them now and see all the shit I was saying 10 years ago. I was like, well, I wasn't wrong, was I? Oh, okay. But so on that note, Patrick, Chip, Paul, what do you guys think? And Redbeard, you end this because then you just take us out. But I think we shoot for next Tuesday, maybe the same time or maybe just a little bit later. And we do the first live stream, just sharing a class, no cost. Whoever wants to join us can join us. And, but there we do it. And we just get into a little bit more of I think it's not minutia. It's the more positive, direct feedback or direct, what's the word I'm looking for? Right now, this has been kind of philosophical in nature. We're being specific when we come to specific people about specific issues, but generally speaking, this is a pretty, 1,000-foot view stare conversation. So I know Patrick's big into this. I know Chip already said it too, and Paul as well. So maybe that's what we do. Is next Tuesday. I mean, 1800. Well, we just lost Redbeard. He'll come back, but he's got some internet issues going on. So I guess before he comes back and takes us out, what do you guys think? I mean, is this worth doing, or is this just kind of a waste of time? And whoever wants to chime in, I'll see. Okay, Paul, you're first.
Yeah, I think it's fine. It's Tuesday, not Thursday, though, just to be clear.
Well, Thursday is our normal podcast. This would be a very special thing that we won't do every week, but maybe once every 3 weeks. We do, depending on the topic. See, I really want to do this because of this topic right here. I really believe something more sinister is taking place. So I really want to start sharing information with whoever is willing to listen to it. I mean, type of thing. So yeah, so it would be not the podcast. This is a special. We're just doing a training event type of podcast.
Sounds good.
Anybody else?
Yeah, we will be on our 4-week West Coast swing to visit our little people. So I will leave that to you all, great Americans. But if it's taped, please let me know, because I'd love to take a look at it on.
Well, it wasn't just a question of if you can join us, but what do you think? Is that even worth doing? I mean, in lieu of this conversation, or in light of this conversation, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I don't have I'm not sure the background so much on our colleagues here other than yours, Mark, but yours would be as good or better than anything that I've got. So I think it'd be very important, especially the viewers. Great for any viewers that are able to get it, because I think that the knowledge you'd be dropping would be very relevant.
Well, I think everybody's knowledge here on this podcast is pretty salient to what we are, well, the subject at hand and where I think we are. Yeah, see, it is time to get going. I just lost the light too. So I'm doing them on batteries tonight. I don't have them all plugged in. So yeah, I guess that's it. So let's bring it over to Patrick for the last comments. The same thing on, the question, should we teach this class? What should we do? And then Redbeard, then we'll come over to you for your final comments on everything writ large and our outro. Patrick.
Yeah, I think definitely that's something that the viewers would want to that they could gain from. There's a lot of talk about, we just threw out all these things and all these different circumstances and events that could impact people's lives. To give them the actual, I hate to call it the answer, but like viable solutions that they can use during these things to mitigate or get themselves away from whatever, if it's a threat type situation. I think that's invaluable, and then it's literally life-saving material. So if I'm available, I'd be glad to be part of it. If not, if you guys want to send me that stuff, I'll definitely take a look at it too, and add in whatever I can that you guys. Mark, I know you can probably communicate or convey that stuff too.
Well, you may still have it, because again, these are slide decks from way back in the day when we were talking about stuff. But I'll send them to you again after this podcast tonight, and take a look. And and if you can join us on Tuesday, oh hell yeah, I would love to have you there if you could join us on Tuesday. So for everybody watching, I think we should just call time. Is everybody okay with the time like that we did tonight, 1700? So 1700 next week Tuesday. What would that be? That's I don't have my calendar right in front of me. Today's the 13th. So 14, 15, 16, 18th. That's 18 July, Tuesday at 1700. We're going to do a live stream. And if people are there as we're teaching the class, we'll bring you on. And if you want to have a question or for a comment, we'll do it that way. And we'll just see how it goes. And if there's 2 people, that's fine. I'm still going to do it. So, Redbeard, I guess we're bringing it over to you for the finals and your final comments and then the outro, sir.
Yeah. So not really much to be said. We all did a really good job. I think we wrapped up kind of our points, and overall, I was actually really happy with how this turned out. It's I think the biggest takeaway is that there's so many different situations that factor into the use of C.A.R.V.E.R. It doesn't always have to be an imminent attack. It doesn't always have to be this, but it can just help for general preparedness. It can help for analyzing your environment and stuff like that, and really just getting a better scope of things for us as individuals. If we break it down to an individual level and not a larger group entity, if you will. And I think the idea of doing a training and talking about, particular gear choices, like stay fit, like how fitness and health actually factors into, a defensive or a deterrence as it pertains to C.A.R.V.E.R, right? Because
or your survivability.
Yeah. And it's I do think that we do face several different threats. And I would say that, some people might agree, some people might disagree with this, but I think one of the biggest threats is ourselves, and our overall dependency on so many of these different infrastructures and so many of the different government entities and stuff like that. We used to pride ourselves as Americans of being independent and being robust and having resources and being resourceful, and I think we're slowly starting to kind of get back into that, but it's going to take time. But I think I do think that for the general populace, the overwhelming dependency on so many things is kind of our undoing. It's not, we could argue about the transformers, we could argue about the railroad, we could argue about all these different things, which are very, they're very good points. But in the end of the day, if we ourselves are not to a certain degree self-sustainable, if we're not adept in certain skills or not capable of even getting ourselves past the 72-hour mark, we are probably the weak link in everything there. Mark's heard me say it 100 times. I love this saying by Dostoevsky, which is, to live without hope is to cease to live. I'm a very hopeful person. I believe that it is in our fiber as people within our country and as Americans that we are resourceful, but we have to get back to being resourceful, and we have to become more adept and more capable human beings. And as a result, I think that's the best deterrence, the best defense, and it's the best way we can harden our our country to anything that happens, whether it's man-made, whether it's a natural disaster, whatever the case is. So I think going into next week, it's really, that's just going to drive that point home even more, and hopefully it's going to bring some light to, like, hey, look, this is what you can start doing now today to start affecting that change. Because in the end of the day, I'm sure we all agree, it starts with us as individuals, and it starts with the communities, and then it grows up from there. So
hey,
I don't know
before you take us on the outro, I just got one last comment that your comment just inspired me to think of and say, there was a day when we were at war, and our adversaries said things like behind every blade of grass. Like, they didn't want to invade them. They're like, oh, hell no, behind every blade of grass. I'm not so sure that's how we're viewed anymore. And Jeremy, your thoughts made me just kind of think about that. So way to go.
Don't
take us down the rabbit hole. Let's just end it there.
No, but I do feel like that's the case, though. I think our perception in the world has changed. So that I'll leave it on that. So on that note,
well, hang on before you do your outro then. So on that note, the world's changed. So then I'm now 100% committed. Tuesday, the 18th of July, we'll shoot this video 1700 Central Daylight Time. It will be a live stream. If you want to join us, and we'll teach a class. Yep. And then whoever joins us in the live stream joins us, and then we'll post that video the next day. Mm-hmm. So I say we do it. I'm 100% in. I'm in.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. And
Patrick, if we can get you there, that would be awesome. Paul, I mean, Patrick, you're kind of a maybe. Chip, he's like, we know he's not going to do it, but he's going to be watching shitty baseball and eating nachos and stuff. Paul, are you maybe on the fence, or should we let's talk afterwards?
No, I'm in.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Yeah. Redbeard, then it's all on you, sir. Take us out.
Yeah. So on that note, thanks everybody. We really, really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your personal lives to come hang out with us, and not only that though, but to be able to provide information to those who watch. And because I think it is an important conversation, and I hope that all of you will be back in the future down the road on many other subjects as it pertains to not only, our domestic issues, but also other issues, and even just preparedness. So on that note, guys, look, the flame of liberty shall not and will not ever be extinguished so long as there are people who support and defend it. And that means each and every one of us. So, Mark, that's all I got. So if you're good with that, let's roll out.
All right, everybody. We'll see you on the next podcast. Thanks. Woo!
Cheers.